You're listening to Mad Mike's Smile Time.
Okay, yeah, stop. Alright, you morons. Bonjour, tabarnak, and welcome to another episode of the Smile Time Variety Cast. And despite the fact that you are all morons, I still respect you all way more than I respect Ronnie Radke. So as you know, I made this Falling in Reverse discography video earlier this month, where I absolutely ripped that band a new one and took Ronnie Radke behind the proverbial woodshed, right? Well, not even 1 week goes by and that video already became dated. You know why? Because Ronnie freaking Radke got in another online flame war again. Wow, surprising. Who did he flame with this time? Anthony Fantano? Really? And why did this flame war happen? Because Fantano dared to be critical of one of Radke's songs. So yeah, Fantano made this TikTok mocking Falling in Reverse's new single, Watch the World Burn, and Ronnie took real big exception to it. Because how dare you make a mockery of one of my songs? My music is sacred. I'll have you tried and sent to the gulag for this, Fantano! And it led to a day-long flame war on Twitter, to which Fantano absolutely bodied Radke by comparing how much they've aged. And after he obviously lost this flame war, Radke kept fucking ranting about him for the rest of the goddamn day and probably for a few days after. Okay, so I want to preface what I'm about to say with this legal statement. I, Mad Mike, am not accusing Ronnie Radke of any criminal wrongdoing, nor am I making any factual statements regarding Mr. Radke's personality or his mental health. This is merely the opinion of one Mad Mike. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, Ronnie Radke, in my humble opinion, is a complete narcissist. I've dealt with people like this my entire fucking life. Absolute legends in their own minds and nowhere else. They absolutely refuse to hold themselves accountable for jack shit, and when they do, it's only for their own personal benefit. They hold everyone around them to standards they don't hold themselves to. They gaslight everyone around them. They treat everyone like shit, that sort of thing. And most importantly, when they get called out on their bullshit, it's always everybody else. It's never them. Ronnie Radke only becomes a petulant child with people because they started it. He only started shit with Fantano because Fantano mocked his song. He started shit with Eddie Trunk because Trunk had an opinion on his usage of laptops. He threw a microphone into the audience because his audience was asking for it or some shit. I don't fucking know. None of this is Ronnie Radke's fault. It has nothing to do with him being an asshole. It's everybody else who makes him be an asshole, right? You guys get the point now. This dude is an insufferable, fundamentally unpleasant, miserable, childish, narcissistic troglodyte. Imagine being this fucking miserable when you are sharing a bed with Soraya. Literal perfect example of small pee-pee energy. That being said, I hope he never stops being like this because it gives me and other creators like Trenches and Meltdown endless fucking material to mock him with. That's all I wanted to rant about. Moving on. Alright, now it's time for rapid fire album reviews. So before I get to my February reviews, I gotta talk about an album I missed in January. And that album I missed in January was As in Gardens, So in Tombs by And Oceans. And holy fuck, this album goes hard. This is the 6th album from these symphonic black metal veterans and the first one I've ever heard. And if they're this good 25 years into their careers, I need to go back and see how they were in their prime. This album is as beautiful as it is intense. The production is actually coherent, the vocal performance is extremely good, and the symphonic moments add a large touch of epicness that elevates this album above mostly everything I've heard so far this year. I know I picked Rye as my album of the month for January, but that was before I listened to this, so I'm changing my pick. And Oceans made my album of January 2023. And the first February album on this rapid fire is Sanguisugabogg's Homicidal Ecstasy. This is Sanguisugabong's second full-length album after 2021's Tortured Whole. If you want my thoughts on Tortured Whole, I thought it was kinda forgettable. And while I do believe Homicidal Ecstasy is an improvement over Tortured Whole, I'm afraid that's the best thing I could say about it. I don't think the album is bad per se, but I don't really think it rises above anything other than just being a brutal death metal album. It's fine. It's mildly executed, mildly produced, and the songs are mild. Normally I would forgive an album for not breaking any new ground whatsoever, but I can't here because the songs don't really do much for me. Perhaps Salty Superdog is just not a band I'm ever going to get, but I was waiting for this album to blow me away, and unfortunately it just didn't. The songs don't really have a proper structure to them. They just kinda do things, and don't really spend time building things up or paying things off. They just find a riff or a beat, and they just do them. Build up and release, folks. It's important. I can't call it a bad album, but I can't really call it good either. It's mid. I look forward to it being on my mid list for 2023. And the next album I'm reviewing is Pierce the Veil's new record, The Jaws of Life. And, well, what the fuck do you want me to say? This is generic and bad. The band checks through a bunch of tired emo and pop-punk cliches with a touch of Rage Against the Machine worship on the track Past the Nirvana, and they go full-on Imagine Dragons core on tracks like Even When I'm Not With You. By the fourth track of this album, which was called Emergency Contact, I actually wanted to call my Emergency Contact because the boredom almost made me choke on my own dildo after I passed out gobbling on it. There is really nothing to bite on in this one. It is worse than I thought it would be. Same generic riffs, same whiny ass voice, same overly melodramatic emo tone, same fucking garbage. Pierce the Veil made a Pierce the Veil album, and it's not even a good Pierce the Veil album. It was next to impossible for this one to hold my attention. Out of every album I've heard so far in these first 2 months of the year, this one is the most forgettable. Fuck this one. Next. Alright, so this next album I'm reviewing is from pop punk icons Paramore with their latest effort, This Is Why. This band hasn't really made anything special since Riot, and they've kind of been riding on the coattails of Hayley Williams being a manic pixie dream girl ever since their inception. I don't even know what to say about this one. It goes into some reggae ska direction that we've heard a zillion times, and I normally would be forgiving of that if the songs were memorable, but unfortunately they are not. The album feels distant and phoned in, Hayley doesn't sound enthusiastic in her singing at all, and the rest of the band has nothing really interesting to offer us. Much like Pierce the Veil, it feels like Paramore just gave us another album for the sake of giving us another album. I'm just gonna stick to Riot if I want something from this band that's listenable. Next. And the next album made by a tired legacy act up for me to review is In Flames with Foregone. You know what I've realized? In Flames is like the Bill Goldberg of metal. Haven't done anything relevant since the 90s. Every time they come back, they steal the spotlight from all the young talent that deserves it way more, and whatever they do leaves the metal scene in much worse shape than it was before they came back. As for the album itself, well, after jerking off with a bunch of experimental crap for the last few decades, In Flames decided to go full death magnetic here and release something that was reminiscent of the times when they were the band in Melodeath. The problem here is that's all they're really doing. Just playing a fucking In Flames greatest hits album without the hits. This feels like one of those Disney live-action remakes, you know, where everything is shot for shot and it features some of the same songs and same actors, but it's ultimately just a soulless piece of nostalgia bait at the end of the day. Yeah, that. And personally, since I've never really been a fan of mid-Flames, this album does not appeal to me at all. It's the same tired Melodeath tropes, and this band has been musically eclipsed by much better Melodeath acts for a long time. I know a lot of In Flames fans are going to love this album and see it as a return to form, and that's totally okay, but for me, this is a tired album made by a tired band going through a midlife crisis and trying to relive the glory days. If I want a classic Melodeath band that's actually pushing themselves forward, I'll listen to Insomnium. Speaking of which, and now we have a legacy Melodeath act that actually gave us something good. Of course, I'm talking about Insomnium with their new album, Anno 1696. From the acoustic-y intro on the opening track that swells into a Melodeath epic, I knew this album was gonna be a good one. It's not the only multi-layered epic on the album, as we also get the 8-minute dynamic showcase that is Godforsaken, as well as the spacey Starless Paths. The album also gives us some heavy marching numbers like White Christ, and they give us an acoustic ballad in The Unrest. You also get some shorter Melodeath anthems like Lillian and The Witch Hunter. This album is a little bit of everything song-wise, otherwise, and all of it is good. The album shows that Insomnium haven't lost their touch and that they're willing to build upon what they've done before and continue to grow. Take notes, In Flames. In terms of dynamic, epic Melodeath releases, this is a terrific album and one of my favorites of the month. Listen to this one instead of Mid Flames, people. So now I'm reviewing Deicide's Bible Bashers, and turns out this release was just a package of 3 of their albums from the 90s. My bad. I thought this was an actual new album from the band. Thanks for wasting my time by not specifying what this album was, Loudwire. And up next is my review for HELLRIPPER's Warlocks, Grim, and Withered Hags. I'm getting this right out of the way right off the bat. This is my album of the month. I've always had a soft spot for blackened speed thrash metal. Devilmaster made one of my favorite albums of 2022, and I was a huge fan of Skeleton Witch back in the day. So this HELLRIPPER album was right up my alley. After hearing this album, it absolutely blew my mind that HELLRIPPER is a one-man band. I mean, one-man bands are pretty much the norm for black metal, but James McBain, what a name.
Nice to see you.
Makes this band sound like it's 3 or 4 members. Straight up, there are multiple guitar solos on tracks like Cursed Carry On Crown, and the solos feel like they come from different guitar players. The way he's able to switch up a style like that was truly mind-boggling for me. HELLRIPPER is an immense talent in the metal scene, and judging by the riffing, the soloing, and the terrific vocal performance, this guy can only improve as time goes on. This is my album of February, and it might be one of my albums of the year when it's all said and done. And the next album I'm reviewing is from Japanese power metalers Lovebites with Judgment Day. Lovebites have been around since 2016, and this is their 4th album they've released since then. If you're looking for innovation and originality, you're not going to find it in power metal, and this album is no exception. You'll hear a lot of Keeper's era Halloween worship on tracks like The Spirit Lives On and Wicked Witch, and Halloween worship on a power metal album is to be expected. That being said, in terms of songwriting and execution, this record absolutely goes hard. I was really taken aback from how heavy this album was able to get, especially on tracks like We Are the Resurrection and the title track. The album does kinda overstay its welcome a little bit on the second half. I feel like most of the second half songs could have been a few minutes shorter, but the intensity doesn't let up at all, so I can't complain too much. And it doesn't stop these ladies from giving us the best power metal release so far this year. If you want some good old power metal full of banging songs, Lovebites' Judgment Day is the album for you. Alright, and my last February album review is Steel Panther's On the Prowl. And who gives a fuck? So my classic album review is on the way, but before I get to that, I want to give a shout out to my favorite beer of all time, Coors Banquet, also known as Coors Original. It's fucking delicious. Sponsor me, you cowards! The classic album we'll be reviewing this month is Ironworks by mathcore legends The Dillinger Escape Plan. Bit of background information here. Dillinger Escape Plan was formed in 1997 in Morris Plains, New Jersey. The founding members consisted of guitarist Ben Weinman, bassist Adam Dole, drummer Chris Penny, and singer Dimitri Minakakis. Eventually, Dole left the band and Weinman took on double duty as lead guitarist and bassist. Brian Benoit, no relation to Chris, would end up joining the band on rhythm guitar just in time for Dillinger to release their landmark debut in 1999, Calculating Infinity. To put this into perspective for the old school metal crowd, this album was to mathcore what Kill 'Em All was to thrash. Mathcore may have already been a thing in the underground, but Calculating Infinity gave the genre its first legitimate, iconic release. With legendary tracks like 43% Burnt and Sugar-Coated Sour, Calculating Infinity launched Dillinger onto the scene and established them as a force to be reckoned with. Now, if Calculating Infinity was Dillinger's Kill 'Em All, then their 2004 follow-up, Miss Machine, was absolutely their Ride the Lightning. Singer Dimitri Minakakis was replaced by the now legendary Greg Puciato, and nothing was ever the same again. This album built on everything Calculating Infinity was doing and showed just how much the band had evolved and matured. They also started combining their chaotic, dissonant style with hooky songwriting, especially on tracks like Unretrified and Setting Fire to the Sleeping Giants. Miss Machine was an improvement in every way on Calculating Infinity and showed that Dillinger was here to stay. Now, if Calculating Infinity was their Kill 'Em All and Miss Machine was their Ride the Lightning, then the album we are talking about today Ironworks is absolutely their master of puppets. So getting this out of the way, Ironworks is a top 50 album of all time for me. I remember not being too big on mathcore in my youth, but as time went on, I gave this genre another chance by listening to Dillinger, and, well, this was the album I gravitated to the most. Ironworks feels like they perfected everything they were working on in the previous two albums. The chaotic time signatures, the eerie raspy dissonant vocals, the lyricism, the hooky songwriting, the riffing, all reached their peak for this band and created what is, in my opinion, Dillinger's magnum opus. Just listen to the way this starts. The opening track, Fix Your Face, begins with an onslaught of insanity as Pucciato screams his heart out to the backdrop of all over the place riffs and blast beats before seamlessly transitioning into a catchy groove. It sets the tone for the album, and it continues hitting you from all sides the rest of the way. One of the sides this album hits you from is by being eerie. Between the two hit singles, which I'll get to later, you have some borderline ambient, eerie tracks like Sick on Sunday and When Acting as a Particle. It's almost like the album is giving you a bit of time to relax after punching you from everywhere at the beginning, before continuing to drive you insane some more on the tracks Nong Ai Gong and 82588. Now, as all over the place and chaotic as the album is, it still has some really hooky, catchy tracks that non-mathcore fans can fully enjoy, namely Black Bubblegum and Milk Lizard. Both of these tracks retain the unpredictable nature of Dillinger's music, but they also streamline themselves just enough to give us grooves, riffs, and choruses that stick in everyone's head. That, to me anyway, is what separated Dillinger from many of their contemporaries. They had this amazing ability to strike the fine line between being technical and catchy. I would say accessible, but I don't really like that word because it implies that the music is dumbed down and that you must be a pleb if you like it. I've never really been about that shit. After giving you Milk Lizard, Ironworks goes back to hitting you from all angles again on the brutal track Party Smasher, followed by the eerie, borderline heavy Dead as History and the nasty Horse Hunter, before ending the album on one of the greatest closing tracks of all time, Mouth of Ghosts. Just when you think you've heard everything the band had to offer at the time, they close the album with a borderline jazzy song that crescendos into a groovy, heavy final 90 seconds, sending you off into the sunset with a smile on your face. What a way to end an album like this. As I already stated, Ironworks is a top 50 all-timer for me. It's an absolute masterpiece, it's Dillinger's best work in my opinion, and it is the greatest mathcore, math metal, whatever album ever made. I'd recommend the shit out of this one. So now's the time we get Phil Michaels to take over the show for a little bit. Apparently he's got an electronics store or something he wants to tell us about. What do you got, Phil?
Hello, Niagara. If you're dumb enough to buy a new TV this Christmas at the most expensive price, then come on down to Phil Michaels Electronics. Awful outdated TVs, no remotes, black and white screens. We've got them all, and at a price your boss can't even afford. We also have broken record players, blown-out speakers, dirty 8-track players, and VCRs that chew through your cassette like a dog on a tennis ball. Oh, you don't use VCRs? Well, you stink. Come on down to Phil Michaels Electronics for your holiday shopping needs, all at an unaffordable price. But wait, there's more! We will also be selling home personal computers with 500 megabytes of storage and a full 20 megs of RAM. This offer ends on Boxing Day, so don't wait, don't delay. Come on over and take advantage of this offer that is totally not outdated or ridiculous. We offer everything for you. Endless paperwork, fast deliveries in 3 months or less, financing at a low monthly rate, no money down. Wait, let me rephrase that. Financing at a low monthly rate? No! Money down! Also ask about our buyback program. Did you bust your stereo? Don't worry, we'll buy it back from you at 10% of what you bought it for. Also make sure you get our extended warranties. This stuff is 30 years past its expiry date, but you're such a sucker to come here in the first place that you'll fall for this claptrap too. Phil Michaels Electronics. You install it, we gouge your wallet. Come on down.
So, yeah, check out that place, I guess. Maybe your old Blockbuster card can work. It's ranting time, and I'm gonna rant all over the place. The thing about the metal scene that's pissing me off this month is this idea that you need to be of a certain background to be into this music. You've probably heard this from a bunch of gatekeeping neckbeards in this community about how you can't be a real metalhead unless you went through some shit and come from a poor or lower class place. No. You don't need to be some poor, depressed abuse victim from the slums of this world to appreciate and love this music. I know plenty of people who had great upbringings and lived comfortably who are bigger metal fans than I am. Hell, I know people who are in metal bands right now that come from rich families and they totally embody the metal attitude and they are kick-ass people. Conversely, I also know people who got treated like fucking rag dolls in their childhoods and have an abundance of mental scars and they like the fucking Backstreet Boys. This idea that you can only be a metalhead if you've been through some dark bullshit in your life is exactly that. Bullshit. Why? Because your tastes are unique regardless of your background. It doesn't matter what you go through as a kid. You'll gravitate to a certain form of art just because you happen to have an inclination in your own mind to like it. At that point, it doesn't matter why you like it. You just do. This idea also annoys the fuck out of me because guess what? Who hasn't been through some bullshit in their lives? Maybe this is just me, but it seems to me that the lower middle class people think rich people don't go through crap and that fucking, upper class citizens don't have their own little fucking loads of bullshit they have to deal with too. And it's such a stupid way to think. You mean to tell me that little Johnny Rich kid that likes metal didn't have a dark upbringing? That kid likely got ignored by his workaholic parents and shunned a lot at school because he was the rich kid. He probably got used by kids at school because he was the rich kid, and he only had friends who liked him because he had money. That rich yuppie kid that you think shouldn't be a metalhead because he never went through shit like we did probably had the loneliest existence possible and is probably why he likes metal now. Or hell, maybe he found solace in listening to K-pop. Who fucking knows? My point is, your background does not determine your taste in music, nor does your taste in music determine your background. This fucking gatekeeping way of thinking needs to die yesterday, and if you believe this shitty background garbage, you very likely have a small pee-pee. Nobody wants the small pee-pee, so please stop thinking like this so this scene can grow. Thank you, fuck off, rant over. Alright, so before we end this month's episode, I got one last thing to do, and that is the Q&A. So how this works is that I allow a very special group of people on my Discord to ask me some questions in one of our chats, and I go ahead and answer them. So let's get to it, shall we? The first question here is from Basil Bonehead, and he asks, got any oddities that you enjoy listening to? Bands that very, very few know about that you love the music? Rock, metal, whatever genre and or subgenre? Well, thank you very much for your question, Basil, and that is a very good one, and I do have a couple of answers for that. So I'm from the Niagara region in Canada, and we do have a very strong local scene. Back in high school, there was a big ska punk band by the name of Ceremonial Snips. Unfortunately, they didn't really hit it that big outside of the region, but they were a very strong band with a strong local cult following at the time. I recommend anybody to check them out. They haven't been a band for a very long time now, but I'm sure their stuff is on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that, and I'd give them a listen. They're a pretty strong, solid ska punk band. Another one is Ill Scarlet, and it's unfortunate that they never really hit it big outside of their one-hit song in Canada, Nothing Special, but I have their album All Day With It, and it is one of the strongest local albums I've ever heard. They are mainly influenced by Sublime, and they even cover Santeria live a lot, and they were always an interesting band to watch. They put on great live shows. Again, their album All Day With It, which features the track Nothing Special, is very strong for what it is. I suggest you check them out as well. And another oddity band that very few people know about that I do enjoy is another local band by the name of Various. That's Varius. They are a metal band from Niagara Falls. They have a couple EPs out on Spotify. If I were to describe them, it is, well, their band name pretty much describes them. They don't really pigeonhole themselves into any particular subgenre. They're a little bit metalcore, a little bit progressive, a little bit mathcore, a little bit traditional heavy metal, a little bit of everything, to be honest. So that is another band for you guys to check out. Various, Varius. They're on Spotify, Apple Music. They're also on Instagram if you want to check them out there. Give them a listen, give them a like, give them a follow, give them everything. So thank you for your question, Basil. And the next question comes from an average meme lord. What's one band from any genre that you think deserves so much more recognition than they have? Good question there, average meme lord, and my answer is Metallica. I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, going back to the last answer, I just want to say Varius, if you guys want to check them out. They are a very solid Niagara Falls band, and hopefully they can get bigger across Canada at least, or at least Ontario. Another one, and this is a slightly local band, even though they're not technically from the Niagara region, they are more from Hamilton, and that is, get ready for it, type simp in the comments, Sumo Psycho. Of course, I loved Initiation in 2021. It is still my number 4 album of that year. Can't wait for their next work. I've circle jerked this band enough in my Discords and in my videos as well. It's become a fucking meme at this point. So go ahead, call me a simp, but I really do think they deserve to be bigger than they are. Pop metal kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap, but I think what they do is incredibly seamless. One of the best pop metal acts in the world right now, right up there with Electric Callboy, even though they're technically electronic-core, but fuck it, they're pop metal, whatever. All right, and the next question comes from Melvin the Hugger. What's a bad album you'll stand up for? That is a conundrum right there. So I'm guessing what he means by this question is, what is a album that a lot of people hate that I will die on the hill for? So I was gonna go with a post-Black Album Metallica album, but I'm not gonna go for the cliches here. There is an album made by a Brazilian metal band that goes by the name of Sepultura. The album was called Roots, and at the time, this album was controversial as fuck because they dared to not be thrash for this album and instead go for a more groove / new metal sound combined with traditional Brazilian culture music. And it got a lot of fucking flack at the time. I personally love this album. Even though I'm not a big fan of groove metal overall, nor am I the biggest fan of new metal overall, I think what they did with Roots was absolutely phenomenal. The way they combined these styles with Brazilian tribal music, and it led to some fucking awesome songs like Roots Bloody Roots and Ratamahata. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'm not too sure. I apologized if I fucked that one up, but I think this album's a fucking banger. I don't think it's better than Arise or Beneath the Remains, but I still think it is way better than people give it credit for. I know a lot more people love it now than they did at the time, but at the time of this release, it got fucking blasted by people. So that's an album that got a lot of flack that I would die on a hill for. So thank you for your question, Melvin. Up next is kind of the opposite of the last question. This one is by Fred Durst Simp, aka Blackwater Rust. Is there an album you enjoy by a band you mostly hate? Ooh, that's an interesting one, because most of the bands I despise, I tend to despise everything they fucking do. So off the top of my head, I can say Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. I can't stand most of the stuff that Guns N' Roses has done. Most, if not all, of their post-Use Your Illusion work is fucking terrible, and even Use Your Illusion itself is mostly mid with a couple of great songs. But giving credit where credit is due, Appetite for Destruction is a very, very good album, and I absolutely respect it for its impact. I don't love it as much as most people do, but I still really, 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 really like it. And Paradise City, Welcome to the Jungle, My Michelle, Sweet Child of Mine, all fucking bangers on that one. So that is an album that I enjoy by a band that I mostly fucking can't stand. Thanks for the question, Blackwater. Okay, and the next question is from Apparition. If you have them, do you have any local metal scene anecdotes / memories in your neck of the woods, the trading scene, etc.? I guess a memory that I do really look fondly on was when I was in a cover band way back in the day. I think this was like 10, 12 years ago or something. And we had just started out and we had like 12 to 15 songs that we really nailed down. I was the drummer for them. I don't play drums anymore, but at the time I was really into it. And we went to go to this open mic show, and the stuff that was played at this open mic was mostly like old blues, old country. And here we go with some fucking Megadeth, some fucking Metallica, and even System of a Down. And we totally blew the fucking roof off that place. And I just remember when we were playing that show, everybody who was watching us was just like, whoa. And, you know, I stopped drumming about 4 years later, and I just lost the passion for it. But a lot of the people I played with went on to play in other local metal bands, and they are still thriving in their careers to this day, and I applaud them so much for that. And so, yeah, that's a memory for me. Thanks for jogging that one, Apparition. All right, so the final question of this Q&A is from Grace Omega. Who was / is your all-time favorite wrestler growing up and your current favorite? I'll answer this one quickly. My all-time favorite wrestler is... Rest in peace. Yeah, it's The Undertaker. I just grew up being so fascinated by that character. And yes, I cried when he retired. I cried watching his Hall of Fame ceremony. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, he's the GOAT in terms of athleticism, in terms of match quality, in terms of character. There was nobody ever better, and I think his legacy is that, you know, we always talk about who's the next Stone Cold, who's the next Hulk Hogan, who's the next Shawn Michaels. You know, they say Seth Rollins is the next Triple H. They said AJ Styles was the next Shawn Michaels. You know what? There is no next Undertaker. That's his legacy to me. He is the absolute GOAT. As for my current favorite, MJF, I think what this guy is doing is absolutely phenomenal. The best heel in the business right now, absolute generational talent, and the sky is the fucking limit for the guy. He can cut a promo like nobody else. He can hold a crowd into the palm of his hands and get them to cheer when he wants to, get them to boo when he wants to, and also his matches are fucking good. So yeah, I love everything about that guy. He's already broken through that glass ceiling, and I can't wait to see what he does next. And that's it for February's edition of the Smile Time Variety Cast. I'll see you guys next month. Au revoir, tabarnak!